What did a crush do that made you instantly lose interest in him/her? She asked me if I wanted to go to a concert with her. Then she wanted me to pay for both tickets that I knew she got for free. Promptly laughed at her and told her she can F off with some other idiot. It's funny how fast the ugliness on the inside can overcome anything good on the outside. She did me a favor that day. Story 3. We were out drinking. He got drunk and started fighting a guy that he thought had been harassing me. The guy said he didn't harass me. I said he didn't harass me. My crush still tried to defend me. Never lost interest faster. He was mostly a mean drunk. The fact that he chose to protect me and not attack me seemed coincidental to me, and there was no reasoning either. At least that was the impression I got, and it made me very much afraid to start anything with him. It was very educational for me because I had been crushing on him hard for a good 2 years. Finally got what I thought I wanted, and I was over him in a time span of 5 minutes. Edit. To add, he wasn't a bad person, and it was the first time I saw him that drunk, but I could foresee a future of domestic violence that evening. I'm still in contact, and from what I've heard from his wife, he's self-centric, another thing I couldn't see back then, but has never been aggressive towards her. Story 4. Here's a lighthearted one. I developed my first crush when I was in 2nd or 3rd grade. This was right around the time when Pokemon were first becoming really popular, so naturally I was obsessed with them. I had the cards, the Game Boy games, etc. One day, I overheard the girl I had a crush on talking to her friends at recess about how weird Pokemon were, and thus, in a flash, a young love was extinguished. Fast forward about 22 years, and my wife also doesn't like Pokemon, because life is strange. It's weird, man. Like, back in the day, I'm talking 25, 30 years ago, it really was, seemingly taboo for girls to, be into video games and Pokemon, stuff that boys were into, and if they did like it, they were very, very secretive about it. It's crazy to think about now, but that's a very real thing. Girls weren't allowed to like boy things, boys weren't allowed to like girl things. Just crazy times, right? Story 5. I had known this guy for a few weeks and finally had a date at his to cook me dinner. Texted him a couple days before to say hi and asked him how his day was. He told me it was great because he had morning sex, then a good day at work, then a date and sex with a totally different person. On the one hand, thanks for making it easy for me to dump you, and on the other hand, maybe work on not being a 100% a-hole. Edit. This was in real life and talking for a little over a month. So not a it's Tinder and just for sex situation. Story 6. He was mean to his mom, demanded money from him so we could go out, in front of me, and then called his grandma to get some more money so we could go out. So uncomfortable. Edit. Let me add more details. We were both around 21 to 22. I met this person, drove from the Midwest to Dallas with him, and was essentially stuck there for 2 days before my train was scheduled to leave. This behavior was not acceptable at all, and I felt uncomfortable the entire time. Story 7. Not my crush, but someone who had a crush on me, or so I was told. She asked for my birthday, and I told her. She then calculated that I was younger than her by a week or so, and straight up said to me, quote, I did have a crush on a guy, but then I found out he was younger than me, so now there's no crush. Damn, dude. When you're a kid, just being older or younger than someone in general, even if it's by a week or a month, it seems like an eternity. Because if you think about it as a percentage of the life that you've lived thus far, obviously the older you get, the less that seems to matter. But yeah, when you're 7 or 8 years old, someone being 5 or 6 months older than you, I mean, it's like they were just born in a totally different generation. Story 8. Found out she was a cousin. We were in class together, and it was all a pure coincidence. Neither of us had any idea until a family member casually mentioned to me, doesn't her name go to your school? Well, crap. Story 9. He couldn't understand why girls weren't interested in him. Never took hygiene seriously until his mid-20s. Because he never brushed his teeth, he developed an abscessed tooth and let it fester. Customers started complaining, and he was sent home from work until he got it fixed. The entire time I drove him to the dentist, I made him stick his head out the open window. It smelled terrible. Dentist gave him a good talking to about how his bad teeth could affect his heart. Soon after, he started showering and brushing his teeth every day. Story 10. This is a serious response. He threatened to unalive me and himself if I broke up with him. We were alone in the house and he was having some sort of episode where he spaced out, became robotic and dissociated. This made him act very slow and lethargic. He had mental issues. I grabbed my stuff and ran. Never saw him again, but I know he was hospitalized. I'm married now and he hasn't contacted me since. I actually hope he's doing better. Story 11. Turns out he never bothered to develop a personality because his looks and sporting prowess carried him through every interaction in his life. I didn't care about sports, so when I finally ended up having a one-on-one chat with him, the guy was a complete void. Couldn't talk about anything. Hadn't even developed the ability to ask questions because he was all too happy to just be praised and talked about all the time. It was so bizarre. He didn't really know what he liked, had no real opinion on anything outside of sports, didn't have any hobbies, and was generally just dull as dishwater. Edit. So I'm seeing a few responses saying I was possibly dismissive of him and his interests since I dislike sports, or that maybe he was just shy or couldn't really ask questions. No. I've met plenty of people that like stuff that I don't, but their passion for it and their desire to share it with you is what brings you into the conversation. There's a difference between being talked to and talked at. This guy didn't care if I watched or liked basketball, whether I understood the references, or whether I'd heard of a player, a coach, or anything. He didn't actually bother, even with the one topic he cared about, to actually include me in the conversation. Also, when I asked him what he did in his downtime, he said he sometimes played video games to de-stress. I asked which games he loved playing, and he said, and I quote, "Honestly, mostly anything." No follow-up. Then I asked him about his last basketball game, and he went into chatty Cathy mode again. Rinse and repeat with me asking about movies, TV, art, politics, food, holidays, childhood memories, friends in common, etc., etc. He never asked me a single question the entire conversation. Not even, "Do you watch basketball?" He was just happy to talk at me about it like I should just enjoy listening to him go on and on about his stats and his player interactions and his strategies. Edit 2. We were on a coffee date that he asked me out to, so for people saying I was clearly barking up the wrong tree and he didn't want to talk to me, I'd argue that probably wasn't the case. Story 12. Crush on a girl in my junior year of college. She liked to heavily make fun of people, and I mean hard. Like, to the point I would say hi to someone I knew. After we walked off, she would have some remark. She went from attractive to not wanting to be around her very quickly. Story 13. I've shared this story before, but one time I was out on a first date with this girl I met online. I thought she was very attractive, and we seemed to hit off well through text. We're at this bar, and she suggests we play a people-watching game where we try to make up backstories for the other people there. I thought it sounded fun, especially since I played a similar game with friends on the train sometimes. Plus, it felt like a good icebreaker to get us talking. Well, she managed to take all the fun out of the game by being ridiculously cruel in all her assumptions for no real reason at all. It felt like she was projecting issues she had onto these people. Like, one guy was sitting at the bar alone. Could have been waiting for someone, you never know. But because he was alone, he was a effing loser with no friends that hates his life. Completely killed the mood, and I lost interest in her after that. Couldn't see myself going on a second date with someone like that. So, kind of noticing a theme here between like just being mean and being full of negative energy and turning people off. Who knew? What a concept. No one wants to be around people like that. Story 14. Any misunderstanding or asking a question for clarification was met with laughter and mocking. He even got his mom in on it. That crap wears you down so fast. By the time we were going through our divorce, I was convinced I was a total idiotic F-up who couldn't do anything right. I was home at my parents' house and I did something really small. I can't remember exactly what, but it was like I spilled a bit of water or dropped a towel. I said, "I'm such an idiot. I can't believe how dumb I am." My mom looked at me strangely and said, "No, you're not. Why would you say that?" It took lots of therapy and time to recognize and accept I'm not an idiot, but being told time and time again that I was, I started to truly believe it. That's a very long way of saying good for you for getting out of that situation, and yes, he was a F-head. Story 15. Didn't defend me when his friends tried to assault me, just laughed with them. This is the long version of the story. I've never been popular, was always bullied and stuff. One of the things people told me was that I was a prude, because I had never had a boyfriend at that point. Apparently, some of my classmates got inspired by that and started a bet. Whoever could do me in, a slang word in my language that can mean anything from making out to sex, would win. Every contestant put in a certain amount of money. At the height of the contest, it was about €100. That would be their prize. All of a sudden, I was invited to popular parties, people tried to make me drink, random people started talking to me, flirting, groping. More and more people became aware of the bet, so even people I'd never talked to, or who were complete strangers to me, started to hit me up. It was weird. I was still in the dark about the bet, and I didn't get why some guys, sometimes even girls, wanted to hang out with me or wanted to see me drink. Luckily for me, I don't drink, but it was all very uncomfortable. My crush and I went on a school trip together with the rest of our year, and all of a sudden things get out of hand. People groping me, now the supervision of the teachers is half gone. People trying to ask me if I ever kissed someone. The most scary experience was when a couple of guys cornered me in the park and told me, very detailed, how they wanted to have sex with me. Some of them were my classmates, some of them were friends of my crush, one of them was my crush. You can imagine how scared I was as a 15-year-old, no adults in sight, only me and these 10, 16-year-olds. I was hoping my crush would defend me. He was a nice guy, never laid a hand on anybody, always friendly, but he just laughed. They were telling me how they would SA me, and he laughed. It took 2 more months before another girl had the courage to tell me what was going on. She used the word do in, and I was too flustered to ask if she meant the light version or all the way. When I told the teachers about the bet, about all the people who were involved, about how no one told me anything about it, not even the girls, they told me I had, quote, no proof, was imagining things again, and that boys will be boys with hormones. What can we do about that? It all stopped when I got a boyfriend that very summer who was 5 years older than me and would later turn out to be an abuser. He looked like he was 30 though, so I guess most of the guys got too scared to lay a hand on me. But yeah, that's how my crush lost my interest. Story 16. Long distance, only online crush/boyfriend. We were playing a modified TTRPG in the early 2010s, and we made the horrible mistake of playing versions of ourselves. Same names, ages, etc. Lots of crap happened, but the thing that really made me feel like crap was when I felt like a third wheel with him and his best bro. We were playing in a survival setting, so we could delegate chores to make sure we had supplies, fuel, ammo, etc. by the end of each day. Every time my BF would choose to go with his guy friend for things. I didn't mind the first couple of times, but I did kind of want a day where the two of us hung out, since again, this was a LD relationship. Never happened. The one time I forced the issue and said I was coming along to hunt or something, they just ignored me and did their usual thing. Joke's on me though. Turns out BF was deep in the closet and hanging out with his guy friend in game was him living out his fantasy of having a boyfriend. Story 17. Not me, but my wife before we met. There was an event in Salt Lake City and she was from Northern Washington. She had a crush on this guy and decided to join carpooling with him and a couple other people. They stopped to grab some fast food and went back on their way. Well, as soon as he finished eating/drinking, he tossed the whole bag out the window while driving. After that, she barely talked to him, and once they got to SLC, she left him and joined some other friends and went back home with them instead. Story 18. I had been seeing this girl for 2 months in college, and things were going all right. I was helping her move when she decided it was the moment to have a serious talk. She sat me down and, in a very serious tone, told me she had been doing some digging. She confronted me with the fact that I dated black women. I kind of thought it was a joke at first. I guess my brain couldn't comprehend that this was still a thing. No, she was dead serious and explained to me that while she had nothing against black people, she didn't believe in mixing races. I was dumbfounded. I got up and walked out. Story 19. A few things. She told me how she hated how much guys share their feelings/emotions now. She said that if she dates someone, she wants them to be a typical man and not show any type of weakness. One of those things like, I don't want to hear if a man is sad or upset, I just don't care. She liked pretty heavy music, like prog metal and hardcore music, which is cool. However, she didn't like anything else and would blatantly put down any other type of music and or not give it a chance. Almost made you feel stupid for liking anything else. Showed her a friend's artwork and her response was, quote, yeah, not impressive. It would be impressive if they did X and Y. Like, I understand that you don't have to like every person's art, but her demeanor about it was too condescending. Edit. Didn't realize this comment would get as big as it did. To be honest, I have no hard feelings to her. We moved on. It's okay. And for sure, I don't think it's representative of all women. People have their own preferences. What she liked just wasn't my thing. Story 20. Got accused of cheating. All the time. Apparently, when I asked one of my lab partners what our homework was outside of class, that meant I was effing her. I wasn't aware. And then I checked my phone to see what time it was. It was because I was, quote, reading some other female dog's texts. And when any woman would comment on one of my Facebook statuses, you better believe it was because we were screwing around when I wasn't with my ex, according to said ex. My former romantic partner seemed to think that I'm way more desirable than I really am, and that I must have been slinging some serious Don Juan Kong Dong, like some kind of sexual stallion, all over town. She was incorrect, so it was not confirmed in this story, but I'd be willing to bet that she's just projecting her own insecurities, and she's probably the one that's messing around talking to other dudes, just saying. Story 21. In my very first relationship, they kept telling me every effing day how much they'd been hurt in the past and that they hoped I wouldn't make them suffer the same. I tried to help them, like talk about their problems and all, but since it was a long distance relationship, it was kind of hard. And them always talking about wanting to self-unalive themselves. Things made me so worried. It was terrible for my mental health. I wanted to leave since it made me lose interest, but I didn't want to hurt them. Like, they kept saying how much they've been hurt. And one day it was too much for me, so I just blocked them everywhere. I know I'm kind of the bad guy in the story for just leaving like that, but I just couldn't bear it anymore. Edit. I read most of your comments. By the way, thanks for sharing your POV. And I didn't mention that before blocking them, I just said that I'd lost interest and didn't want that relationship anymore. Literally just these words. I was so confused, I didn't know what else I could say, and just wanted to go away from that person. And that's literally the worst thing I could have done. I realized thanks to some of your comments. So please, if you ever find yourself in a similar situation, don't do the same mistakes as me. Explain to that person how it's been for you, so maybe them and their future BF/GF won't have to live the same thing. Story 22. Had a crush on this girl who was dating someone at the time. I was hanging out with her and she kept checking her phone. Later, she announced she was upset because her SO hadn't texted her first that day, so they hadn't texted at all. She was building resentment over literally nothing. Useful insight into what a relationship with her might have looked like. Story 23. My father smoked in the house while I was growing up. Everything smelled like cigarettes. He ended up dying from COPD. I promised myself I'd never date someone who smoked. Now, my wife was a smoker for years before we met, and she quit within a month of meeting me, without me ever talking to her about my feelings regarding cigarettes. I never even saw her with a cigarette in her hand. After meeting me, she just took it upon herself to quit. 10 years later, she still doesn't smoke. Story 24. She asked me to prom. I said yeah. 2 days before prom, I actually don't want to go with you, but I already bought both of our tickets. As the guy, I expect you to pay me back for them. I tried to explain that's not how transactions work. She kept telling me it was my responsibility. I asked if she was smoking crack. Never heard from her again. Story 25. Not necessarily a crush, but a married coworker I might be interested in if she were single. My coworkers had a bar crawl for a holiday party one year. We finished at one of the bars, so some of us started going to the next bar that was just down the street. My coworker and I passed this one store that sold games like Magic and D&D. She half-joked that she was tempted to go in and laugh at the people in there. That rubbed me the wrong way for 2 reasons. First, she's a school counselor and talked about how bullying is bad. A hypocrite much? Secondly, I'm the kind of person who might play those kinds of games, so she unknowingly said that she'd be willing to laugh at me. Story 26. They poked fun at my mom. Going to a primarily white school, him and a group of his guy friends always made fun of how she dressed and how short she was. I didn't super know him, but he was a part of the group that did, and that's all I needed to know. My mom is this sweet, short Asian woman who loves to smile, and yes, she sometimes wears goofy clothing, but no one makes fun of my mama. No one. Story 27. He was an ass to our teacher because he was going to play baseball in college. Looked him up, and he's definitely not doing it professionally and hasn't graduated yet. Edit. I looked him up to see if he was a professional baseball player yet. I like to see if anyone that was good at sports succeeded. And he's kind of bounced around from university to university. Since it's been over 4 years since high school, that's why I threw in that he hadn't graduated yet. Story 28. We went out to breakfast, maybe our second or third date, and bumped into his friend who sat with us for a bit while ordering a coffee to go. Just long enough to be super rude to the guy serving us. I just couldn't get over the fact that he had friends like this. I let it fade out. Bumped into him maybe a year later, and he opened with telling me that he'd written off that friend as a total jerk, and that he should have stopped giving him the time of day after high school. I literally high-fived him, which he thought was funny, and went out for a few years after that. Story 29. Went on a date with a guy to a Chinese restaurant, and as we were leaving, he threw trash on the ground when there was a trash can a few feet away. Then we went to his house to watch a movie, and he picked his cat up by the scruff of its neck and threw it. Not as set it down to get it off the counter kind of thing, but a legit throw across the room. I left right then and there and told him why. He called me a female dog and a tease, for whatever reason, never gave him the impression I was going to sleep with him that night, and was yelling at me as I was backing my car out of his drive. I got to the end of his road and blocked his number. Story 30. She said no when I asked her out. She never disappointed me, and I think I could have feelings for her again, but the fact that she doesn't feel the same way killed my feelings automatically because I believe in somebody who returns my feelings deserves them more. We got friends, by the way, and I still like her, but in a friendly way now. Story 31. Smoke in my car. I knew she was a smoker, but doing that in someone else's car, especially a non-smoker, without authorization is a complete lack of education. Made me even more pissed because the previous owner was a smoker, and it took nearly a year to take that smell off the car. Even the car got pissed at her. It broke down half the way. LOL. Story 32. I had a huge thing for him, but he was never really interested in me. Every time we would have a serious conversation, it was very special to me. One night, while we were texting, he was talking about how he had hurt his leg, on purpose, in the shower, and that he was bleeding pretty badly. He had attempted to self-unalive himself before, so I figured he might be doing something stupid again. After a scary conversation, I managed to convince him to get help and fix himself. It was a very bad moment that brought us together. However, it wasn't until years later, still had a minor crush on him, that I learned that that night he had been high on cocaine. That was the tipping point for me. Story 33. I'm actually on my way to meet this one, but the last 24 hours have made me have second thoughts. I smoke weed and used to deal. She knows this and has been arranging to meet with me for last week. Every time it comes up though, she mentions smoking and me sorting her out with some. I don't mind her asking me to buy weed as long as she pays me back, but it's like every other message she sends. Don't get me wrong, I'd love a stoner girlfriend, but not if that's her whole personality and all the value she sees in me. Story 34. Not so much a crush, but a really good friend who we messed around and, in fact, lost our virginity to each other. She went from a badass punk rocker with tons of artistic talent to a fundamentalist Christian because it was her emotional reaction to her father's unexpected death. She fell really hard into an evangelical cult and her entire personality changed. She became cold, mean, rigid in her values, and started adopting very conservative/bigoted views. I tried to maintain friendship because I thought maybe I could be her lifeline to turn her back on this addiction, but I couldn't. She eventually told me that either I had to be a Christian or we couldn't be friends, and that was that. I'm actually friends with her on IG, and she's a conservative housewife and looks completely unhappy. It's really sad what she could have been. Sad though that may be, absolutely made the right decision to go your separate ways. When your core beliefs and values in life diverge that much, it is pretty much impossible to be together at that point. So, Instagram friends, as good as it's gonna get. Story 35. Already shared, but I'm a scout, and during the meetings, I knew this girl and she was very beautiful. A year after, she moved to my school. I studied in the morning and she at the afternoon, so we used to see each other when I was waiting for my school van. Yep, a van, not a bus. At the start, when I saw her, I said hi and she would say hi back. However, after a few days, she just looked at me when I said hi and go back to talking with her friends. She looked at me like I was a weirdo. Adios, interest. Story 36. We're out on a second date with a girl I fancied, went bowling, and had a really great time, although I can't remember if I won. Afterwards, she told me a friend of hers really wanted a pair of bowling shoes, so she decided to casually slip the rentals down her purse. Silly small theft, I guess, but still had me lose all interest instantly. Story 37. I was chilling with them, and they said, at least I'm cute. If I wasn't cute, I don't know where I'd be. I'm so glad I'm not ugly. Being ugly must suck. Immediately, I wanted nothing to do with them. I was like, get the F out of this car. In my head. Thinking you're hot crap is not a good look. Story 38. Asked her out. She said yes. Then she dumped me 2 weeks in, saying she didn't want to start anything new because she was moving in a month and didn't tell me. Then that time came for her to move, and where does she move? Into my house. She got with my roommate that looks creepily close to how I look. We would often get mistaken for brothers, twins even, and started a committed relationship with him. There were some thin walls in that house too. Story 39. I crushed on a girl for a couple years and didn't ask her out because life was busy for me, but eventually I was able to ask her out. I took her to the movies to see the most recent Star Wars movie. Before the movie started, she was slamming beers down, which I have no issue with drinking, but she was near sloppy drunk. During the movie, she would talk throughout the entire movie and constantly look at her phone. Funny enough, she would make some rude comments towards other people for talking, and I would cringe at the irony. Later that night, we drove to a gas station so she could get cigarettes, and she was being completely rude to the cashier because he couldn't understand what she was asking for in her belligerent state. She tried to convince me to stay the night with her, but any attraction I had for her was completely gone. Story 40. There was this one girl in my class, and probably not a crush, but she was kinda cute. She was a really outgoing person, friendly, and just seemed kinda cool, and she seemed rather smart because she was always reciting. After some months of being in the same class as her, I was grateful I didn't go after. She was grouped with some of my friends, and she always didn't do crap, and I could not carry her weight. Whenever we had tests or actual finals, she would either find some excuse not to take it or just don't show up at all. Story 41. When I was staying in a psychiatric ward several years ago, I became friends with one of the people who was there to treat an addiction. The addicts and the general patients weren't supposed to mix, but I was in a really bad place at the time and became very attached to him, so spent a lot of time with him when the nurses weren't looking. At first, he didn't want to tell me what he was in for, and like an idiot, I didn't question it. Eventually, he told me that he was in for looking at CP content. Yep, that killed my crush pretty quickly. Yeah, I don't care what the context is, like, if you're in there for looking at CP, like, that should be an immediate, like, 20 red flags go up. Cancel them with immediate effect. That's sick. Story 42. Earlier this year, I was newly single and sleeping around a bit. I met this girl called Harriet. She was lovely, and we had sex a few times, but she was really nice and always had loads of energy. Once at like 3 a.m., she cleaned my kitchen and cute but weird things like that. Turns out she had a crippling speed addiction and just effing bombed it for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. That's a no from me. Story 43. For context, this was in 1986. Nancy Reagan's Just Say No to Drugs campaign was at its height. I was totally in love with a girl at my junior high school. She was a year older than me. I had mustered up the courage to ask her to meet me at our town's Oktoberfest. She agreed. We were sitting eating a bratwurst or something, and she asked if I wanted to go smoke some weed. Without hesitation, I stood up and walked away, never to look at or speak to her again, because, after all, at the time, the youth were being told that pot was equal to heroin use. I've thought often of how that went down and how it could have been the most epic night of my life. I'd like to find that girl today and burn one down with her. Story 44. First date. We chatted online, seemed all good. He knew I was alternative in my styles, etc. He shows up with this god-awful necklace. Like it was if he had a bad idea of my style, which is exactly what happened because he'd obviously Googled alternative necklaces for girls or something. I'm not great at receiving gifts anyway, but he presented it like he was asking to marry me. I politely declined, saying, "Oh, that's nice, but I don't really know you. I can't accept this." Maybe we could have laughed about it with the grandkids years into the future. Nope, he starts crying and asking why I don't like his gift. He picked it out specially. It was a symbol of his love. Oh boy. I noped out of there fast. He called me a whore later, and I just shook my head and got on with life. Story 45. I had a crush on a girl through most of high school, but was rarely in class with her. I think I first saw her in gym as a freshman, then didn't have another class with her until senior year. I actually ended up in a work group with her in senior foods, which I guess we both took as a blow-off class. It was there that I stopped having a crush on her. What did she do? Honestly, nothing. She was nice and friendly enough. I don't recall her being stupid or boring or anything. She just simply came down off the pedestal I had put her on in my mind all those years, and she became an acquaintance rather than some amazing goddess. Once the mystique was gone, I kinda lost interest. Story 46. Went out with a guy once and we decided to become a thing too quick. When I mentioned I wasn't wearing a bra, he hit a set of train tracks full force and everything jumped. But also you couldn't tell I didn't have one on, and I only mentioned it as a joke. He lost it and kept asking why I wasn't wearing one and how he didn't even notice, but what if someone had, and all this other stuff. This is just the tip of the iceberg though, because not too much later, I asked how he felt about the LGBT side of things, and he was coolish, until I said that I also liked women, to which, even after we both went to our respective homes, he kept texting me about, asking things like, "If you're bi, then do you want a girlfriend?" "No, I'm with you." "So you just want to have like a threesome or something with another girl? Do you have someone in mind?" "No, I already told you I'm not super into sex either way, and like I said before, I'm with you." "Well then, how could you be attracted to women then?" "I just am. Just like there's other men out there that I could be with, but currently I'm not." "So you want to have a threesome with another guy then? I thought you were into girls." "No, just forget I ever said anything. Oh my god." So that happened. Then he decided to bring up politics on our second date. You know who was the best thing to happen to America, and when I politely disagreed but said it's fine that we don't have to have the same political ideals, he lost it. Would not stop trying to sell me on he who must not be named. kept citing reasons I should like him, all of which were pretty flimsy in my opinion, and which I kept saying I didn't want to talk about it, and it wasn't important at the moment as we'd only dated for less than a week, and it wasn't that serious yet to consider all our beliefs and how they differed, but he wouldn't stop. It was just ridiculous how much it mattered to him that I liked the man. After 2 days of silence, I texted him and said I wanted to break up and how sorry I was that I felt this needed to happen, and he didn't even try to apologize or anything. Okay, is all I got. Still think about how narrow-minded that dude was. Story 47. She was a tall redhead with big blue eyes who loved the outdoors, and I was way out of my league. Somehow I talked her into going with me to a concert in the park, one of those summer evenings next to a lake. Some middle-aged guys in Hawaiian shirts playing Jimmy Buffett and Eagles songs, and people our parents' age dancing in the light of tiki torches. We copped part of a bottle of rum off a guy in a ridiculous hat and white shorts and gold chains. We passed it back and forth as I sat leaned up against a tree and she leaned into my shoulder. It was magic. Then, on the way home, we were driving down one of those winding, hilly roads through the woods. As we rounded a corner, there was an opossum standing right in the middle of the road. Not just one, though. A big mama with babies stacked on her back. I swerved left. She went left. I swerved right. She went right. Right under the driver's side tire. Holy crap, that was awful. And this girl in the passenger seat just laughing. Not a little nervous laugh that people do when they're uncomfortable. She was sunk down in the passenger seat, contorted with her hands on her stomach, laughing hysterically. I couldn't even look at her after that. Story 48. He was studying medicine, and during a casual conversation, he stated, quote, "Gay people are so unnatural," and that he would use whatever means he had to refuse service if he ever got one of those under his care. He was 20-something years old and on his second year of med school. I broke all contact that same instant, not before calling him an incompetent and unethical piece of crap. Story 49. I was in college and had a crush on a girl, and I'm pretty sure she knew it. A small group of us went out for a few beers, and she says that she would find dating a lot easier if men would just whip their chicken out so she can be sure she isn't wasting her time. I get it, the beer was talking at that point, but she was otherwise kind of sweet and innocent, and the exchange simply blew the entire persona out of the water. Story 50. I had been chatting with a guy I met online. He was a chef and seemed pretty swell in text. So we met up for sushi, and I'm aware of the fact that I can be a bit of a rambler, especially when nerves are a factor. I'm usually fairly conscious of this, so after going on about theater for a while, I made a point to ask him some stuff. I said something to the effect of, "Well, I've been rambling a whole bunch. What about you? What's your big passion?" And he responded, "Oh, me? I'm boring. I just want to get to know you." It was an immediate turnoff for me. I don't know if that was meant to be flattering or what, but I'm interested in dating a whole person with independent thoughts and feelings. Let this be a lesson, people. Even if you feel that your life is boring, your hobbies are boring, people want to know. And especially if it's something that you're interested in that the other person doesn't know about, just share it. Don't be afraid of being judged. And if they do judge you, then you don't have to date them. It's as simple as that. Story 51. Went out and got dinner with her. We both had a great time and wanted to go again. She didn't have a day off for a couple weeks, so it was going to be the next Friday she had off. Sounds good. She told her friend, who told me it was one of the best dates she'd been on and had an awesome time. She canceled. No big deal, had to help her mom or something. More or less ghosted me after I tried to set something up again. Left on red on one occasion, sent me a shrug when I asked when she had time off, next on another. She was wondering why I stopped texting her as much as I used to. If you act disinterested, I'm going to be disinterested. Crap ain't high school. Story 52. A coworker and I were always flirting and even went out on a few dates. It seemed like we were about to start something. Then one day she suddenly went cold. Maybe she was afraid of us actually getting closer since we worked in the same company or whatever. After a few attempts of inviting her out to places I knew she would enjoy, I started giving up on her. As soon as I pulled back, the more she started to act all flirty and cute towards me again. But whenever I would ask her out, she would go cold. So I decided to ignore her advances, even if it hurt. Luckily, one day after me ignoring her for a week or so, she came into my office and told me a joke. What's the difference between us and a calendar? She asked, trying to keep her laughter. I told I had no clue. Then she finally answered, "We don't have dates," and bursted out laughing. That very moment, I kinda was instantly over her. Story 53. When I was in university, there was this one guy who was the hottest guy I've ever seen. He always had girls clinging around him when I saw him out. He tried to pick me up one night, and OMG, he had no game or ability to be flirtatious. Immediately turned off. Looks are cool, but I need some mental stimulation too. Story 54. I went on a Tinder date, pre-pandemic, with a guy I'd recently matched with. He would not let me pay for a round of drinks. He got offended that I tried and angry when I insisted. The fact that he saw his societal niceties as more important than my wants and needs was a huge turnoff. Edit. A boyfriend of almost a year was angry with me for landing and accepting an internship a couple hours away. He knew I had applied to it. It was only a couple of months long, but he was angry that I hadn't asked his permission. Story 55. Went to a movie with my crush. I was so excited he asked me. Got sodas, popcorn, got to our seats, all through the movie. Instead of lifting his soda to his mouth and using his hand like a normal person, he would lean forward and hover over the straw, while his eyes were in the screen, and suck up the drink. I was done. He was never the same person to me. Story 56. Kept flaunting his wealth when he knew all too well I was struggling with money weekly, and struggling to find a new job to help that. That and the ability to freely do anything he wanted when I was still living in a restrictive household. Crap hit hard when I realized how incompatible we were. Kinda glad too, cause I've got a better boyfriend who treats me perfectly, and we're finally moving in together at the end of the year. Story 57. Girl I was talking to agreed to go to prom with me. Prom gets canceled due to coronavirus. No big deal, because the students will throw a fake prom in a month so no one misses out. About a week before we decide that we won't go because it was going to be hot as F outside, and then she proceeds to go by herself without even telling me. From what I heard, she complained the entire time as well. Story 58. We were drunk at a party and found out she was basically an antagonistic, child-free advocate that not only didn't want kids and thought all kids were stupid and irritating by definition, but actually thought all people that had or wanted kids were stupid sheep to biology, and that children should be bred in labs and raised to maturity by specialists solely to repopulate the species. Also expounded that we should euthanize anyone with disabilities to conserve resources for what she considered were productive members of society. So yeah, basically a Thanos Hitler. This came up when I was talking about how cute my new niece was. Not wanting kids is one thing, but I mean, holy crap. Story 59. Went on our first date and we're sitting outside at a cafe. I was just people watching. She was pointing out what was wrong with everyone that passed by. She said she enjoyed picking out people's flaws. She thought it was a good date, wanted me to go home with her. I was so disgusted by her personality and chapter that I was just like, nah. She was incredibly hot physically, was a bikini barista. Couldn't stand to be around her once I saw how she looks at other people. Story 60. We were running, he got hurt but wanted to keep running. Then he started crying and moaning while running, even though I said multiple times that we should stop running because he was hurt. He didn't want to stop. He started actually screaming while running. When he started cussing at the top of his lungs, I left. Take care of yourself, dude. I'm not impressed by toughening through the pain. Story 61. We somehow got on the topic of politics and gay marriage, and she said, and I quote, I don't mind gay people living together, and they can collect the same benefits as married people. I just don't think they should be allowed to actually be married. It was the quickest I went from liking to hating someone. Story 62. I'm a naturally hairy woman. Since I was 13, I could spend an hour per day shaving myself and there would be visible hairs the next day. It's especially bad in my groin and armpit regions. I literally cannot get a clean shave there. I have decided to ignore arm hair and my little mustache. I pluck my chin and eyebrows, shave my legs relatively often, and do the best I can with the aforementioned problem areas. In high school, this guy and I took a liking to each other. Everyone thought we were so great together because we were both outspoken and tended to get philosophical quite often. This can be annoying to other people, so they figured we would go great together and not annoy each other. They were kind of right, I suppose. I mean, we did hang out quite a bit, but there was one thing I couldn't get over. Now, this guy, he's pale, blonde, and scrawny. Even in his early 20s, I don't think he's ever had a single chin hair yet, not to mention general body hair. The hairs he does have are all pale and barely visible, too. And at one point, he said he thinks people with body hair who don't shave are absolutely disgusting, and any romantic inclinations I had towards him just vanished. I can't live under a razor because of a dude. Screw that. Anyway, we're still friends, and I hope he figures out that's a completely ridiculous thing to say to a woman. Story 63. Defended drunk driving, admitted alcoholism and sex addiction, but was actually proud of them. Constantly, pretentiously refers to herself as a mathematician due to having a degree in math and a career in accounting. Laughing at the fact her kids are more responsible than her, and usually have to tuck her drunk ass into bed. held the attitude that every parent traumatizes their kid, and that I shouldn't worry about kid psychology as much. Got by in life because she's very outgoing, intelligent, and attractive. Story 64. Met at the cafe we both worked at, interacted a couple times, and we hit it off, and he seemed like a lovely guy who was interested in me. I told my best mate about him, and he was happy for me, and was excited to meet him, as the three of us, plus another work friend, were all going to be at the same event soon. The event rolls around, and my friend meets me at work as I finish so we could head in together, and Crush shared our Uber to be dropped at his house before heading in with our other work friend. Crush was incredibly rude the entire trip and made little to no effort to engage with me or my friend, despite both of us continuously trying. And when he arrived at the event later on, he was just as blasé and acted too cool for us. Aloofness is such a turnoff, and I was embarrassed my mate had to witness it. Additionally, he's always posting on social media about his expensive jewelry and fashion, and despite not talking to me since I left the job, he hits me up only when I post something a little more vain, and not anything I post with a bit more substance, and not of myself. Glad I didn't waste too much time there. Story 65. We were really hitting it off until he replied to something I had posted, which was about catcalling, and the comments some people left on that post were saddening and frustrating, so I shared it. One comment was, quote, "Women always get so offended when we catcall them. If we give them compliments, are they going to say it's SA now?" He replied laughing at it and said the comment isn't wrong and carried on with sexist remarks. Safe to say, I quickly lost interest, and I'm glad this happened before it got any further. Story 66. Was dating a girl for a short while. Randomly, on a visit down to my town, there was a big snowstorm. Her car needed some wiper fluid, so we stopped at a gas station. She goes in, but they don't have the anti-freezing stuff, so she comes back out and goes on a tirade about how the brown dude behind the counter should somehow control the stock in the store, and that, quote, that's why they shouldn't let them into the country. Apparently, this just happened to be the moment she let her guard down, and over the rest of that time I saw her, and one time I saw her to break up, she just kind of let the floodgates open and proceeded to road rage non-stop, complain about every living thing. Was kind of a nice up until then. Major whiplash. Story 67. Probably gonna get lost in all the comments, but it's a funny one. Years back, I just met this super cute chick at a party. She was smoking and checking me out, and I was checking her out. Cut to later on in the party, and I hear someone say, is she eating dog food? And turn around to this chick on all fours over the dog food bowl eating dog food. She stops eating, looks up at me, and says, "Woof!" Yep, that made me lose interest. Funnily enough, the next morning I was tossing the ball back and forth across couches with this chick, so I got to watch her eat dog food and play with a ball with me. Story 68. Prettiest boy in school, but when he admitted to the whole class that his plan A was to simply live off welfare, he was not disabled or anything like that, mind you, just kind of a stupid druggie, which I didn't know at the time, didn't care about so much as graduating high school, and fully intended to do absolutely F all with his life. Not everyone has a grand goal, and that's fine, but to genuinely just want to rake in taxpayer money while sitting on your ass doing drugs all day for the rest of your life gives such a bad name to the folks who genuinely need that assistance. People like him are why my father is anti-literally every social program, despite them being such a minority. Oh, I also overheard him tell a friend he liked me, but didn't know why because I was a bit thicker, and he also didn't usually like girls smarter than him. Broke up with his girlfriend over it and literally never even talked to me once, but he sat behind me in class and I eavesdropped like a female dog. We also had the same name. A doozy. Story 69. When my partner and I first started dating, I told him how I was studying astrophysics, but trying to be modest about it, I said, I'm studying astronomy. He gave me a weird look and changed the subject, and I thought, fair enough, not everyone's into nerds. Well, the weeks go by and we're still dating, and he confesses to me that initially he had thought I meant horoscopes, and was questioning if he wanted to date a lunatic. Well, then it was my turn. Did I want to date someone who could confuse astronomy for astrology? Yes, it turned out yes. He's actually superbly intelligent. It was just one of those misunderstandings. Story 70. This may or may not be a good reason, or even be read, but I was dating a girl and she wanted to get it on the days I would pick her up, but she just got out from the gym all those times, so naturally she kind of smells like Funky Town. Well, sweatin' all natural is fine, but then I would get in the mood and put my head in her lap crotch area, and ooh boy, let me tell you what, that was a bad move. All 3 days, it was like if you left your fishing glove that's all wet in your pants for days. It was a major interest loss when I found out she was doing it on purpose, so I would dump her. Story 71. In grade 4, I wrote a note to a girl I liked in class if she liked me. Circle 1, yes or no. One by one, kids started laughing from the front of the class back to my seat. I got the note back from the laughing kid in front of me. It was open and she had written no all over it, a-hole. Story 72. Whenever we talked about going out or the previous dates, she would refer to them as hanging out. And then she told me she wasn't sure she wanted a relationship, but wanted to keep going out. I lost interest right then. She also said she would be down to have casual fun, but when I had her over, she changed her mind before sex. She later changed her mind about a relationship, but I was no longer interested. Oh well. Story 73. They didn't care when I was hurt. I was going through tough times, just having had surgery and being bedridden for a month. He had told me he loved me, but he lived far away and was busy with school, so I didn't want to bother him during those times, despite how lonely and scared I felt. Then one day, on top of everything, my dog died. I called him crying and he told me to call back later because he was busy, so I did. When I called back, he completely forgot about my dog and just went on and on talking about how some girls who might be interested in sharing his apartment, etc. That was when I said, I can't do this anymore, and completely lost interest. In general, I actually use this trick to get over crushes. When something bad happens to me, I tell them. If they couldn't care less, then I immediately lose all attraction. I only like kind and caring people. They resorted to a personal attack in arguments or got defensive. I find defensiveness extremely unattractive, and when someone tries to protect their ego by saying things to hurt you, then that means they care about their ego way more than about your feelings. It's so easy to buy 1,000 roses or organize a candlelit dinner, but the most touching, brave, and romantic thing to me is when someone, even when his ego is threatened, still treats the other person with utmost care and respect. My principle is no matter what the other person does to me, I will never say anything purely to hurt or make them feel bad. Their well-being always comes first, and I can only be attracted to a man who believes the same. Complaining and blaming others instead of doing anything to solve his problems. Once I had a crush on a guy that's very kind and sweet. However, he complains a lot about his life, but never takes any responsibility, and has no plan to do anything about it. I still care about him, but how could I find that attractive?